Welcome everyone to Friday's report out. It's great to be here, isn't it, in the old part of the LGI for report out. I think it's the first time we've done it in here, is it, Helen? Yeah.
We did it with Matt.
We did, Yvette. We absolutely did. Yeah, some of you might remember that. Secretary of State came here to see the Leeds Improvement Method and saw the report out in here, which actually it's a nice connection to recent announcements that he's made. Must have made a big impression on him, mustn't we? You know, so that is fantastic. And given that we're in the Gilbert Scott part of the LGI, you get an idea from this of what you can do with a listed building in terms of the renewal of the interior. And of course, now we've got the green light for building the Leeds Way. This building can be repurposed, preserving its fantastic historical features, but renewing the interior. And this gives you, I guess, a taste of what is possible. So as part of the broader plans for the LGI, we want to encourage innovation and investment using the surplus estate that we'll have. So really, really good. But in order to make that a reality, we need to improve the way we work across the whole trust, hence the Leeds Improvement Method, and hence today's report out. So, first up, we've got the LGI Emergency Department Value Stream, RPIW number 2, on cubicle management and shared spaces. And I think, Jane, are you leading us off on this one? Okay, with the team. Great, good to see you guys. If you would like to introduce yourselves, that would be fantastic.
Julian. So hello, my name's Sophie Williams. I'm KPO specialist and workshop lead for this RPIW this week. We're focused around cubicle management and shared spaces. This is our high level value stream map for the overall LGI department, emergency department. And the boundaries for this are from when patient arrives to when the patient is discharged. But for the purposes of our RPIW week this week, we're looking at the clinician assessment and the patient movement following that step. There's variation in how the cubicles in ED are managed and utilised. Often, clinicians are walking around trying to find patient notes, patients themselves, and which cubicle the patients are in. The blue team coordinators are often not updated with information that they need, and patients and relatives, here's an example of a standard worksheet where patients and staff are walking around and unnecessarily with the waste of motion. Thanks.
So hello, my name's Matthew Watkins. I'm team lead for this week and I'm also a KPO specialist on rotation from digital and informatics. This is our calculation of the TAC time. So this is basically the pace of patient demand that's hitting ED-LGI day in, day out. And the TAC time we calculate and the TAC time we use for all of our calculations and all of our work this week has been 10 minutes and 17 seconds. And derived from the observations we did and working with our sponsor and our 2 process owners, these are the 8 targets we set ourselves, and these were targets around removing walking distance, getting the lead time down, work on getting the defects that we'd spotted down to 0 around knowing where the patient is, for example, and the defects around the patients having to wait unnecessarily pre-ECG tests. And also work around making sure that the signage outside of the cubicles is effective.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm Jane Pilkington, I'm the Senior Sister here in ED at the LGI, and I'm one of the joint process owners for this RPIW. So, as you've already heard, our value stream was looking at cubicle utilisation within the ED and how effectively we actually manage that space with the aim to promote a safe, quality experience for all our patients. The event target was to reduce the lead time and eliminate defects in the system. So we observed the lead time from the first time the clinician actually picks up the patient's notes to the first time the patient leaves the cubicle after that interaction with the clinician. So through this week and through the method of rapid, repeated, plan, do, study, act cycles, ideas and strategies were implemented. So as a group at the start of the week, we all came up with a shared vision, and this was to provide care in a safe, appropriate environment where patients and staff feel valued. Okay, these clouds on the volume stream map are some of the opportunities for the improvement that we all identified, and the team are going to go on to expand on what we found.
Hi, I'm Ruth. I'm one of the senior staff nurses in A&E and part of the away team for the RPIW. So these are our sponsor challenges we were given at the start of the week. So looking at this challenge of the blue team coordinator needing to know the availability of the cubicles, we felt that having a visual aid of a map of the department would be beneficial. It enables the coordinator to see at a glance what rooms are free and those that are occupied. The aim of this prototype was to eventually have it developed within our current computer system of Symphony. As it stands, it currently duplicates updating location both on the whiteboard and on Symphony, but in the long run it will enable staff to map the department quickly and efficiently. It was discussed with staff in the home team, and then knowing the eventual plan that it was to be digitalised, they were really engaging. The feedback they gave during the week was mostly positive, as they felt they had better communication with staff, including the doctors, and a better understanding of what's happening with the patients in the department. The whiteboard developed during the week with discussion from the home team regards to the key that's been used and patient-specific identifiers such as falls, pressure sores and dementia. Following on, it highlighted the need for us to have the blue team coordinator to remain at the desk for as much of their shift as possible. It ensured they were able to allocate cubicles for the clinicians to see their patients. In order to assist with this, the doctor's box was moved to the blue team desk. It encouraged active communication between the clinicians and the coordinator. The whole process empowers the coordinator to have full control over the cubicle availability. We've created an S-bar to cascade through the department about the whiteboard and the coordinator roles. And this is emphasised with the new hashtag, I am the boss.
So my name's Natalie, I'm one of the emergency medicine registrars at LGI and St James's, and I'm also a member of the away team. So one of our sponsor challenges that was previously mentioned on the slide was that we needed to try and keep the episode where a clinician sees a patient to one episode within the cubicle, such that they weren't needing to leave the cubicle, walk around the department to find the tools that they needed in order to complete that initial patient interaction. We found in our baseline measures that walking distance was on average 838 steps per hour, and by the end of the week on day 4 we were down to 340. One of the tools that we used to facilitate this change was the evolving idea of an equipment box within the room. We were finding there was insufficient equipment to complete examination and assessment of the patient within the cubicles as they're designed at the moment. So we just came up with a simple idea of a box that contains the equipment that may be needed to assess the patient from our own experiences of reasons to need to leave the room. So it'd be things such as a gas syringe or a tendon hammer, equipment like this. It was put in one of the cubicles with the idea to roll it out, and we'll continue to review the progress over the coming weeks regarding that. Following on from this, a further sponsor challenge involved best use of our space, essentially identifying that patients really only ought to be staying in cubicles within the emergency department with the fixed space that we have for active management or observation. Previously, concepts such as fit to sit have been used, but we actually evolved this throughout the week on discussions with the home team on the shop floor to being actually an assumption that all patients should be fit to sit out, and that you're only identifying those that actually definitely need to stay in. So rather than identify those who are fit to sit, those who are actually not fit to sit. We did this by coming up with the idea of not fit to sit stickers, which there's a photograph of here, and that was the concept being that the assessment team would use these stickers to identify those patients who were likely to need to stay in cubicles. Reasons would be such as needing oxygen therapy or commencing IV medications, or very confused patients or very unwell patients with high news. And these were the patients who would need to stay where they are. This worked in combination with a whiteboard system whereby patients' initials were on the cubicles in either red for not fit to sit or green for fit to sit. And this basically freed up a lot of space and promoted more appropriate use of the cubicle spaces and avoided the unnecessary waste time of the patients occupying cubicles just waiting for things to happen. We also evolved an S-bar to communicate this with the department, and posters on the whiteboard that indicated the criteria.
Hello, I am Mohit Arora, one of the EM consultants, and I'm a member of the RPIW away team. So from the observations the Kaizen team did over the 12-week period, we looked at reasons why patients were left in cubicles after seeing a clinician. So they found that among all the encounters, 23% of patients were waiting for an ECG while still in the cubicle, 15% were waiting for another test, and around 8% were waiting to see a specialist. So we thought we should come up with something which can actually stop or decrease at least this wastage of time. So thus we came up with the idea of a smart room. So this room actually is a quick turnaround room, which is a specific task-focused room. It has to be emphasized this is not an examination cubicle. It can be used by doctors, nurses, CSWs, or any other healthcare provider. It is used for discharging patients, so I could potentially call a patient from waiting room, call the patient in, tell him this is your results and I'm happy for you to go home. It could be used by a nurse to call a patient in to give him some simple medications like paracetamol. It could be called, a CSW could call a patient in for doing a simple blood test or doing an ECG and then send them back to the waiting room. So as you can see, so currently our door is like this. So we have put some, as a part of the Gemba sort of RPIW week, so we have put this on the door. What we plan is we make this rainbow door being a rainbow colored. So it actually depicts like a smart room. So it will be just one cubicle. Direct feedback from the team was very positive. The blue team coordinator quoted, "Gives me a sense of control and I know this cubicle is available for me to use." Also, similar feedback was obtained from junior doctors, consultants, and other people on the shop floor. As for all other things, we've also created an S-bar for the same effect. During this whole period, we also implemented some inflow changes. These included relocation of the blue box to the blue team coordinator desk, which also gave them a sense of feel that everything is under control because everybody comes to her to actually get the new patient card. We also relabeled the discharge tray because there was an issue about missing patient notes. So hence patients can be waiting and they are still not seen because the patients were not in the box. And we found that maybe this can help with slightly eliminating that. Removal of unnecessary signage around the cubicle. So there's quite a lot of clutter around the cubicles on the wall. So we thought decreasing that would help actually coordinate things better and make things easier for patients to sort of see. We look forward to being a part of the planning of future hospital, as Julian said, because we have shown through the Leeds improvement method and RPIW, having clinicians on board and their input is vital for achieving effectiveness and efficiency, along with creating a safe environment for patients and our staff. And also during the week, we had some direct quotes from the people who are working on the shop floor, which is on the floor.
Thanks, Mo. I'm just going to leave those up for a minute.
So, looking back at our value stream map, you can see which of the Kaizen bursts we were able to address during this week. Okay, so 9 out of the 18 bursts have been acted on, and one of these that was very important to all of us and was a talking point throughout the week was that the clinicians were looking round for cubicles in which to see their patients, and we did a lot of focus on this point. Okay, so this is our newspaper and this is what we're going forward with. So this details the work we're going to be carrying on with a full team commitment to maintain the far implemented positive changes and ensure that we keep up with that for the next reviews.
So in the week, the team spent lots of time on the Gemba. They were going there frequently, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. And as well as gathering lots of data, doing remeasuring and that, we did some observation as well. And this is an updated observation of how a clinician was moving round the Gemba, and it absolutely tied in with the data we were collecting, that people were moving less. So we've got the observed data and the recorded data as well. So that, again, just a snapshot in time. And this is where we are. This is where we are today. One of the challenges was to reduce staff walking distance. We wanted to stop the blue team coordinator moving so much, because we know that when they're in one place, there's less defects, there's more control. We set ourselves a target of 20% reduction in steps, and by the end, by day 4, we got to a 32% reduction. We could measure, we could observe that they just were moving less, and I think there's a link there between defects as well. In terms of the lead time, we managed to get 3 full observations. That's from the process start to the process finish, and this is in the week amongst all the other things we were asking the team to do. And on the final day, yesterday, we observed a process that started and finished within 14 minutes. Now that's within the boundary of the other things we've seen. It's an 83% reduction, but we all know, and we would just, really want to make this point very strong, that when we were observing, it was a particularly quiet time. So although there's something interesting going on there, we don't want anyone to infer that what we did in those 3 days has led to but it's within the range, and it did happen, and we observed it. So that was useful. In terms of the quality defect work, one of those was around not knowing where patient notes were sometimes. Now we've got that to 0, but one of the bits of learning we did in the week was realising that quite a lot of that, or most of that, was happening outside of our boundaries. But we still took some action. I think we've shown an image of that, just about how we can also address a problem in another part, because why wouldn't you? You're there, and we acted in consultation with the team. The other challenge was around the systems not telling us where patients were. And again, we observed this, and we've tested it, and we've got that in our observations to 0% by day 4, but we do know how that can degrade again. So we've also got an understanding of how we get it to 0, and we're also very clear about how it could move away from 0 again. Mo talked about cubicle 9, the smart cubicle, and we promise you it is set up, it does exist. The reason it's flashing there is that every time we went back to observe it, there was nothing to observe, there was nothing happening in those periods. So although we got the quotes and we got the feedback and people are very positive, we can't give you any data, because in the times that we went back, we weren't able to gather that. But again, for all of these things, we've got a robust remeasurement plan that we came up with yesterday to support the next 30 days, and we will be getting more data for lead time, spending more time observing. Finally, we started the 5S piece of work, which was around improved cubicle signage, and we've done the sort and the simplify. That piece of work's been done, unnecessary signs have gone already, and then it's just the ongoing work around the audit.
Thanks, Matt. So, some lessons learned this week. We could have filled about 5 flip charts probably about the assumptions we make in our daily work, and it was a real reflection for us all, I think, to realise that and to see how we can start to unpick those a little bit more. And the waste of unreasonable expectation came up this week, particularly for the blue coordinator role. And that's because we were expecting these team members to be doing nursing tasks, being called away to do many other things, and not being allowed to have a break, for example. Or if they did, that might fall down. So protecting that role for its intended purpose is really important. Rapidly changing environments like ED, it can be really difficult to gain sustainable changes, because when we were testing this week, we'd thought we'd solved the problem over here, and actually it'd pop its head up over somewhere else. So we're shifting it somewhere else. So it's really due to resilience and the teamwork from this away team this week. I mean, they have been unbelievable. At 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, they were out there, and you couldn't stop them. Seriously, the PDSAs that have gone on, and the stuff, it doesn't show the stuff they've just done in flow as well whilst they've been out there on the Gemba. So I want to thank them for their resilience, their bravery and their passion with this stuff, because it's clear they want to make a difference for each other, but for the patients as well. And Camilla, who couldn't be here this week, I had to put this up because if anybody who knows about, or has done some Leeds Improvement Method training, that'll be the people that are laughing, because Camilla's lovely Picasso pig here is a demonstration that verbal instructions are not always enough. And actually, in an environment like ED, we need visuals, we need to make sure it's easy to do the right thing, and the power of standard work can achieve that. Often our standard operating procedures that we're used to end up in dusty shelves in a folder, and so really using the Leeds Improvement Method and standard work to emphasise how long tasks take, and using those visuals is really powerful. And then thank you to particularly to the away team that couldn't be here today, that were part of the PDSAs and the testing and the ideas. That's Stafford, Rian, Camilla, Tony and Rosanna, who were all part of the week this week but couldn't be here today. Thank you very much.
Great. Fantastic. Well done. That's great. Great report out. As you know, we're going to do questions at the end, but just to say, got a real sense of the collective collaboration and team spirit that went into that. Really like the message, Mo, from you about the kind of connecting it to our massive opportunity, building the Leeds way, and kind of clinical engagement and clinical leadership around this, absolutely central to the Leeds Improvement Method. So great to hear that, and really, really good collaboration across all of you. So well done, and I guess the challenge is to build on that, keep that going, and congratulate Camilla. That pig's going to be worth millions in future, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much. Okay, so let's move on to our next team. We've got the Acute General Surgical Admissions Value Stream, RPIW3. It's the 90-day report out. And Nazira, Chris.
Hello, my name is Sarah and I'm one of the process owners for this RPIW.
Hi, I'm Chris Clark. I'm also a process owner for this RIPW. And myself and Nazira are here today to talk to you about our acute surgical value stream. Our improvement work has been based around the outflow of surgical patients in the surgical admissions unit based at St James's Hospital.
So the main focus of our project, for those who don't know or not unfamiliar, was to address the length of time that patients were waiting to be moved to the acute surgical wards following the senior decision to be admitted. It had been noted that there were significant delays noted with very little value added to patient care. The patient experience and communication was also quite varied, with a lack of understanding of the next step in their journey. Our baseline for patients awaiting transfer to the wards when we started this RPIW was 5 hours and 50 minutes. During the RPIW week, we were set a lead time target of 1 hour and 42 minutes, which we came somewhere close to achieving during that week. I have to commend the ED team from LGI, done fantastic in your work, so I feel somewhat envious that we've not yet been able to turn ours to green. And as you can see from that, it's still remaining an ongoing challenge, but one that we're happy to be continuing to share with you when we're retesting and reassessing with PDSA cycles. Our newspaper, so these are some of the items that you can see here. So keeping in mind our project goals, a number of our newspaper items focused on improving patient communication, and that was through the introduction of huddles, intentional rounding, and reinforcing our patient pathway leaflet. These changes are being delivered by the SAU staff, and they are being received well by the patients, and there's been a considerable improvement in patient satisfaction. So let's move on to the real crux of this, and that's the lead time. So in order to improve the lead time, we've made various changes, and what we have noticed is that the acute surgical wards, and when I say those, that's on St James's site, it's J46 and J47, and they've been implementing changes to pull patients from SAU in a timely manner. One of the constraints they have faced in achieving this was the delay in completion of EDANs and discharging existing patients. So since our last report out, which doesn't seem all that long ago, we've actually been working very closely with the new surgical FY1s. So there had been a float FY1 identified with the potential for assisting in this task. Now that particular role has since been reviewed, and we've also included changing the name of that FY1 from float, which to me feels like a more fluid role, to acute discharge or an acute flow FY1. I mean, they haven't decided on their own name yet, it's work in progress, but I think making that small change just defines the purpose and importance of that role, and that's to everybody across the board. They've been extremely engaging, and they've been very keen to be part of the ongoing improvement work. So alongside those acute wards, the pharmacy and the discharge lounge, we've collectively created a piece of standard work, and that's for the acute discharge FY1. Since its inception, EDANs are being completed in a more timely manner. There's less chasing by the nursing staff, and that means less time wasted, allowing more of that time to focus on patient care. The beds on the acute wards are ready much earlier in the day, and that's allowing SAU to transfer patients sooner, which is a far better patient experience. We're also avoiding batching of EDANs, waiting to be completed, which takes only, moves us later into the day. There's also an escalation policy in place, and that's if there is any deviation from the standard work, or if any of the involved teams have concerns. That involves calling me. We are collecting all of the data. We don't really have much to show you yet, but we are looking at it before 12 and before 4 p.m. Both of our acute wards are also members of in the pilot of the Discharge Collaborative, and they're showing continuous improvement in early discharges with use of the discharge lounge. This work has been met positively by the acute teams, and though the TPR chart doesn't reflect that yet, we're hoping that it will, and the acute ward is certainly beginning to notice a difference. We're only in our 3rd week of testing, so we certainly need a bit more time, and we hope that we can collect that data for the next showing here. But I think we need to, because it's necessary to affirm that we've had this positive action, and we do hope to see it make an improvement in our lead time. Some of the staff from this testing have been shown that they've been part of it and improved, and a ward clerk of one of the acute wards noticed that there was a definite difference with EDANs being prepped the day before and patients being ready to go first thing. One of the senior sisters in the acute ward just felt that everybody was really working together and trying to achieve the same goals. And I just need to share with you one of the FY1s, and she's really enjoyed this week and felt it took pressure off her colleagues when they're trying to deal with sick patients. And she quite likes the fact that she is now known as the EDAN Queen.
Yeah, okay. So the acute flow FY1 has been trialling with the acute wards and discharge lounge. The early transfer of medically fit for discharge surgical patients to the discharge lounge without an EDAN. This currently goes against the criteria that we've got in place, but we felt that it was important to see if we could free up the acute capacity earlier in the day. The EDAN is to be written whilst the patient is on the discharge lounge, and the acute capacity, which is then free for use by SEU, appears earlier in the day. Patients do, however, still need a senior review on the ward before they can be transferred. A review of the discharge lounge log shows that this trial pathway has consistently freed 3 acute beds every morning by at least 11:15, with some beds being available by 9 o'clock. This might seem a small number, however, when you take into consideration that SAU has only 15 beds, it has a huge impact on the effective and safe patient assessment on SAU. Sadly, however, this impact's not been reflected in our measured lead time from TCI decision to the point of transfer off of SAU, which currently stands at around 7 hours. We do have to, however, bear in mind that these measurements over the last week have been made against the backdrop of a period of increased attendances through both A&E and SAU, and also the trust being in silver escalation and the various response measures that have had to be taken to de-escalate. Yeah. Also as well, looking back over the last year's attendance data, we have noticed that there has been a year-on-year increase in the numbers coming through SAU, which is quite clearly demonstrated there for the figures for last week. The transfer of discharged patients from the acute ward to the discharge lounge, and then the acute admissions coming from SAU, is all being coordinated by a dedicated Band 3 patient flow support. This is not a new resource, merely a reallocation of an existing one. The coordination by the Band 3s is all being done in conjunction with a non-verbal handover for patients meeting an agreed strict criteria, and this has all led to some standard work and ultimately reduced phone calls and interruptions to staff on both SAU and the wards. The standard work introduced for this pathway and the experience reported from both teams is that they both like it, and they feel that with the extra support in place for patient discharge and admission, they can focus their care on the most acutely unwell patients with AMS. And we just really liked that quote from one of the acute ward sisters, which really just hit that home. Further PDSA cycles are now required to pull everything together, but progress has definitely been made in embedding the roles.
Great, fantastic. Thank you very much, Nazira, Chris. That was really clear. Good report out. I'm sure you'll get plenty of questions, and really good to see some of those quotes from colleagues, particularly some of the FY1s that you put up there. And I think you're really good for you to call out the challenges around the lead time and understanding what's driving some of that. And you're absolutely right to highlight the pressures we've been under recently. But I don't think that should be a barrier to stopping us, as you're doing, progressing this work. So really good. So perhaps if we'll save the questions for the end for everyone, and just move on now to the last kind of presentation for today before we go into the Q&A. So, as ever, really important part of report out is presentation of Lead for Leaders. So today I'm delighted to present Rachel Irwin with her certificate for Lead for Leaders. This is great actually because we were on a few Lead for Leaders sessions together, Rachel, weren't we? And I know you've done a huge amount of work on this, and you've really kind of embedded it and got into it in terms of using it up in your work up at Chapel Allerton. So if you want to come forward, get your certificate, big round of applause for Rachel. Great. Okay. So thank you to colleagues reporting out. Well done, Rachel, and opportunity for questions, thinking about everything you've heard today, questions for colleagues in terms of the RPIW this week in ED here at the LGI, the great work that continues to go on, 90 days on, and anything you want to ask Rachel about her experience in Lead for Leaders. So, who'd like to kick off?
Can I just say to Nazira and Chris, I think you downplayed how much stuff you actually have done in your 90 days, because yes, the lead time was not great and you didn't get But there were some quality measures there that you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
You have
Absolutely.
done great work on. So, do you want to share some of that? Because the intentional rally's been happening as well. And
Well, thank you. Yes, and I think we have tried really hard to sort of maintain that positivity throughout. And whilst we do want to celebrate all of that, and we do feel that it has embedded, I think for us, I suppose the challenge is really is to focus in on making some improvements to the lead time. But we're desperately happy that everybody on the team has been so engaging. And SAU staff, full credit to them, they are just absolutely stellar, and they are just, they never shy away from the work. And I don't know if you want to share, but
No,
yeah,
I
they
think
are
I'd agree.
so
I think
willing.
SAU have been fantastic throughout, but not just the SAU team. Certainly through this work, everyone on the acute wards, matrons, clinicians, everyone has seen the benefits of it, and it's just been really heartening to get that level of support and positivity.
That's great. That's
So
great.
actually, the numbers that you reported there, those are the number of patients who present acutely. But on top of that, you have a number of patients who are returning for a review as well. So actually, SAU are dealing with upwards of 90 patients a day.
Wow. Lindsay, you had a question.
Yeah, it was for the ED team. So they're not fit to sit. So we do the fit to sit in SAU because we don't have many trolleys or beds that patients can lay down in. So we encourage most of our patients, and they're ambulatory anyway, to sit. One of the challenges that we've got is the patients that come up to us from St James's ED always come on a trolley. So how do you transfer your patients that are fit to sit up to your assessment units or wards here?
So we try and adopt off the trolley as much as possible when they first come in.
Okay.
I think it's seen as standard. They come off ambulances on trolleys.
Yeah.
They come in, and we drive if you're not fit to sit, then that's the people that should be on the trolleys, and not necessarily always. So we do, for ease of movement. The patients don't want to be sat on trolleys either.
No.
So we absolutely drive that if you could sit in a chair or walk even, patients can walk.
And they would be moved off
They
toward
move
in
off to
a
the ward
wheelchair.
area, so it doesn't put pressure on the receiving area, because you get in your mind, they're on the trolley, they must stay on the trolley.
Yeah, and that's the challenge we have. So when they arrive in SAU, we're not then going to say, would you mind sitting? I know you've been on a trolley for however long, but would you mind sitting now? We feel obliged to
trying to get people in and out quickly.
Yes.
That we get them off trolleys fairly quickly. We don't have enough trolleys to fit everybody anyway, so we have to have some criteria. So it's easy to move them through the hospital.
Yeah.
It's easy to get them through ward doors. Simple things like that, but most of all it's driven by the patient and their ability to do them things in the first place.
I think having worked at both sites in St James's, there's capacity for patients to be in the corridor area on a trolley, and so I don't think there's been the impetus to get people off them. So they're initially on a trolley because they're in pain, they get medications, and then they come out of the cubicle perhaps, still on the trolley, and there's probably a bit of a failure or a delay in reviewing them to get them off the trolley again, because you've got the cubicle spaces freed up. We just don't have the space at LGI, and on the whole patients don't tend to be in as much pain as they do in Jimmy's, where they come in with abdominal pain, etc. But there's definitely scope for transferring the concept over to St James's and just encouraging clinicians to be sitting as much as possible with a view that when they get to SAU they will be suitable for a seated area.
Which would help with the pressures we've got on our 6 trolleys.
Definitely.
Great.
So Lindsay, Robin is at the back there, and hopefully heard most of that conversation.
So I think the other thing we need to replicate as well is that we've done this in central area only, and we've actually got more areas of ED that we need to facilitate this in paediatrics, especially over this side of the city as well as St James's, as somewhere that we could replicate this
Yeah.
Great.
That's really good to hear the exchange of kind of practice and potential improvement, and sharing the approach to some of those challenging pressures that we're facing. But okay, great. Liz.
My question is for the ED team. It was brilliant to see what you were doing, and I was really impressed with that work in process drop that you saw, but you didn't mention that very much. But having just done an RPIW myself, I'm amazed at how quickly that drops when you're not focusing on it, if you like. All the stuff you're doing really pulls that figure down and makes you feel like your system's slicker. Did you note that at the end of the week? Did you feel that?
So we didn't concentrate on that, but you're right, both working all that's what happens.
And do you think there's room for getting to your target? Does that feel right?
Yeah, I think it feels like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Some of the kind of IT systems that will help us get there, but we're doing it in a kind of a blunt way. We're doing it, but everyone's on board because it's proven to work. And actually, we said that this week has been a little bit of a not as busy week. I don't want to say quiet, but not as busy week. But in a way that's been quite positive because it's allowed us to put them processes in place without it being under too much pressure. Because quick change like that for us is big. You know, it doesn't normally happen like that. But they've been welcoming to it, so I think we can just keep driving that. It's helped us to be able to put it in place, and I think we will be able to keep on top of it because the comments come back to us, especially towards the end of the week, has been a really positive thing, so we should be able to maintain that.
That's great. I think it's safe to say as well, Liz, the PDSAs that they did, because they were physical things, like a big whiteboard that you can't just move out of the way, they left it there overnight. And just left it there. They didn't go, we're testing it for 2 hours and then we're going to remove it. It was left there all week, so it was kind of, we have to get on with this, and this is in the loveliest way. But the team didn't give up, and they just carried on because there were physical things in the space there that they couldn't not.
Yeah. We try and work around.
Yeah.
We have tried before. We did a shortened version. We did a Kaizen before. We introduced something very similar to this. That didn't have and leave as much impact, and I have to be honest, that did tailor off a little bit. But what I've noticed this week, and that's probably helped, is that even though it relies on us having 3 nurses on one of our teams, when that comes to night time and you've only got 2, the coordinator's not sat there all the time, it can go a little bit awry. But what we've done and introduced is like sweeps of the department so that we can gather the information. So it's not been put to one side this time, it's been continued. So that's a huge step for us, really.
That's good. Yeah, that's really good, Jane. Couple of questions, Tony. Yeah.
As outside eyes on all this,
I'd
just like to feedback that my experience from acute surgical admissions is one in which I would like to affirm what has already been said about the positivity of staff and their determination to engage with the processes involved in this. And I think it's important to recognise that in cultural terms, this is about securing the emotional commitment of staff to what is going on, without which the whole thing will fall apart. So that emotional commitment is really important. It's about actually being the role that you are, not just knowing about it and doing it, but actually being it as well.
Right.
And interestingly, at a recent CQC summit, an input from NHS Academy, which was about improvement, was exclusively about emotional, the emotional culture of the trust. And interestingly, although that's to do with surgical admissions, where I've actually seen it, I'm hearing it now in relation to the work we've been doing in A&E this week. So that's great.
Excellent. That's a really powerful point, and I think one that sometimes we neglect when we're talking about process and technical side of things. Ultimately, this is all about people, isn't it? And all about heart as well as head, and the kind of sense of collective purpose.
That's
and
the word, purpose.
Yeah, it's so important to serve our patients better. That's a great point.
Just a quick question for Sarah and Chris. I'm interested about the acute flow FY1 that you instigated this week. In paediatrics, we used to have that, but there was a lot of feedback from the junior doctors that it sort of didn't really help their training. There was a week where they weren't really sort of seeing patients, and also they were writing lots of EDAMs for patients they've not had any involvement with. I just wonder how, it sounds like whoever was on this week had a really good experience, and I wonder how you're going to sort of progress that forward with other trainees.
Yeah, I mean, there was always going to be that anxiety that they would have felt. So I had a sit down with the current surgical FY1s. We may have done that over pizza, but we did that, and it was effective. And I think it was more just for them to share how they felt their surgical journey, training is going so far, I think we were openly accepting that while parts of their job are very clinically demanding, some of it, and the clerical, maybe slightly more mundane tasks are equally as important. And I think it was just making sure that they were aware that communication with the GP was so vital, because that's our only link, and just to explain the importance of flow. And I think they really took that on board, and part of their standard work, there is a disclaimer saying, look, I know it's not the most exciting of weeks, but it is 1 week in your whole 4-month placement. But I think they actually find it quite a relaxing from all the intense, so they've kind of almost come to an acceptance that, do you know what, I'm doing this week, but I'm doing it, and whilst doing it, I'm helping my colleagues, so they can deal with other pressures, but I'm also understanding the importance of getting good communication to the GP and patient flow. So I think they've just really grasped it, and I think it is having that open communication early on, and then just embedding that, and the hoping is that when the next team start, then we can revisit that, and then hopefully it'll just become just sort of standard. So maybe happy to discuss.
Great.
I've just got a question really for Natalie and Mohit, which is, it's probably unfair, and I don't think there's a cardiologist in the room, but it just strikes me that in this day and age, a 12-lead ECG seems like, perhaps a bit dated technology, and I wondered if you'd explored whether there was anything out there, given that there are so many devices now for patients to slap on their chests and just, and maybe if you haven't, it's something for you to consider.
Well, it's funny because through doing this process and having the time out from being non-clinical, I actually made the joke that the ideal scenario, so looking at the ideal, would be that the patient owns their own observations, that they have got control over measuring their blood pressure, doing their ECG, they can show the trends and what it was like last week, what it was like last month. And so it's funny that you mentioned that, because it was exactly my thought process. It's not something we've specifically looked at, but it does feel as though there's a lot of technology out there.
So funny you spoke this, because last week actually I'm just doing work on a sequence regarding same-day emergency care for atrial fibrillation. So patients actually should come discharged within 24 hours. So I actually met one of the cardiologists, because we were thinking that it's very tricky to actually get the ECG. Sometimes the ECG gets scanned, they go to the outpatient clinic, but the ECG is not there, and even if it is there, it is not of good quality as to actually interpret what it shows. And sometimes from ambulance it comes, it doesn't even get scanned, so it gets lost. They go to AF clinic, one of the AF specialists sees them there, but they can't decide whether it was AF or not, because there's no ECG. So we were actually thinking of whether we can have something like a triage tool, so at least a trial basis as to which can capture and send it to a cloud or directly to PPM, which will record it and save a lot of time. So there's a new gadget which there's something which is called a Cardia Mobile. So this is a gadget which you can hold it in your hands, and one lead goes onto your knee and it records a 12 lead, goes to a cloud. I don't know ins and outs, but I think it's something we might
Because the other thing is that as a patient, you have to get home dressed and have all that sticky stuff all over you. So I think probably the patients don't.
That's right. No, really good.
I don't know whether it will work or not.
That's great to hear. So if just claim sort of chairman's prerogative of asking the last question, which was actually for Rachel in terms of Lean for Leaders. Rachel, how has it changed how you do your work, and what would you say the kind of main learning points have been for you?
Well, I think it's I'm a fairly new consultant, so I've only been in post just over a year, and so trying to implement changes in a department is really difficult. And as a registrar, as a trainee, I have lots of ideas, but sometimes it was difficult to have the authority or just the tools to implement them. And so doing Lean for Leaders has given me some credibility that I might know a little bit about what I'm talking about, but also I've got some tools to, that are proven and other people have used around the trust to implement these changes. So I'd say, it's given me a passion for quality improvement. So I don't do anything in my day now without thinking, well, that could be a bit wasteful, that's inefficient. I think it's just inspired me and given me tools, I would say.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, go on then, Helen, quick one.
I just got a couple of comments. And congratulations
congratulations to everyone. So I think one of the things I've really picked up today is please don't underestimate the amount of work that's gone on in all of the groups that we've heard about today, because actually we see a real snippet of it, and there's a huge effort that goes in behind that. The other things that I've heard, and we're starting to hear more and more, are around visual controls and how useful they are in very busy departments to support staff to do their job well. So it's the second time that we've heard it from both of EDs, and we hear it now more and more from other RPIWs. And I've also heard that having KPO in the department, sometimes it's a little less busy.
Boxing Day.
Yeah. Excellent. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. That's been really, really encouraging, inspiring. Great to hear about the work. As ever, use that as fuel for your continued commitment and drive around this. It is changing the way we deliver. It's improving what we do for our patients, which is what it is all about, and it's great work. So thanks very much. Cheers.